So when people think about the father wound, they often focus on external experiences. A difficult father, an absent father, a critical father, or an authority figure who shaped their life in kind of painful ways. And while those experiences can absolutely play a role, sometimes the wound isn't only external. Sometimes it lives deep within us. So this is the reason why I pay special attention to Saturn retrograde in the natal chart. I recently got a comment about this, so I wanted to address it here. When Saturn's retrograde, it can become much more internalized. The lessons and expectations, sense of responsibility, even the criticism or the authority, rather than being experienced primarily through our outer world, they become part of our inner world more strongly. So starting with the positive, Saturn retrograde is a very powerful placement because it can support development of strong, unshakable inner authority, sometimes even a built-in one. But before that wisdom emerges, they have to first encounter a powerful inner critic they must overcome by learning the deeper origins of this critic and master the lessons it's offering to empower us. So that voice can early on sound like, you should be doing more, you should do better, you should have figured this out by now, you can't afford to fail, you need to earn your worth. This is why Saturn retrograde can sometimes point more deeply to internalized father wounds or family wounds, not necessarily because of something that happened, but because of what was absorbed or the perceptions or expectations of pressure and fear and the beliefs that came from that. So sometimes these patterns can be traced back to the father, sometimes they stem from both parents, sometimes they appear to be connected like ancestral or generational patterns that have been passed down through the family line on either side. And for those who work with the soul contracts, karma, past life perspectives, Saturn retrograde can sometimes feel like old lessons that arrived with us before we even entered this lifetime. So whatever your perspective, Saturn retrograde often will ask us to examine the inner authority figure living within us. Whose voice are you listening to? Who taught you the standards or who convinced you weren't enough? Perhaps more importantly, are those beliefs actually true? I often tell my clients that Saturn is not here to punish us. It is here to mature us. But when Saturn energy becomes internalized, we can easily become our hardest judges, our own worst critics, and we held ourselves to impossible standards. One kind of broad way to see this is through the elements. Fire sign Saturn retrogrades like Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, these individuals may especially be hard on themselves when it comes to achievement and courage or confidence and leadership. They may feel driven to prove themselves, to push harder, to accomplish more. The wound often will say things like, I must prove my strength. Healing begins for them when they realize they don't have to earn the right to exist and lead and shine. They just do. So earth sign Saturn retrogrades like Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, these individuals may carry deeper fears around failure or not having enough or being worthy or over responsibility. They get stuck in perfectionism and overworking or feeling responsible for everything and everyone else's well-being. It sound like, if I do enough, I'll finally be enough, that kind of thing. So healing begins here when you learn that worth can't be earned through performance and that we are worthy just because we exist. Air sign Saturn retrogrades, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, these individuals, they're gonna internalize the limiting beliefs or self-doubts and those critical thought patterns. They can question themselves constantly, overanalyze decisions, and get in that analysis paralysis, struggle to trust their voice and their perspective and their knowings. That can sound like things, I need to get it right before I can speak. I need to know it all before I say anything. So healing begins when they learn to trust their own thoughts and ideas and wisdom. Now, water sign Saturn retrogrades like Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, These individuals will carry emotional wounds really deeply. They can really struggle to release old pain, old disappointments, old betrayals, or old family stories. Like they can hold a grudge due to that pain. So the wound sounds like, I am still carrying what hurt me. So the wound often is like still carrying all that hurt within you. So healing begins when you stop identifying that wound and begin identifying with the person you're becoming. Letting go is a big theme. So no matter the sign Saturn retrograde is in, it asks us to kind of move from self-judgment to self-mastery, and from fear to standing in our wisdom, from that inherited authority toward authentic authority. Because the goal is not to become perfect, it's to become whole. And this is where Saturn retrograde can be one of that most powerful placements in a natal chart. Because once you stop fighting yourself, once you stop trying to earn your worth, or stop carrying expectations that were never really truly there or yours to carry, something breaks free and you can begin to really trust yourself and begin to become your own healthy authority. And this is often where the deepest healing begins. I'd love to hear from you. Do you have Saturn retrograde in your chart? What sign and house is it in? And do you relate more with that like inner critic, the perfectionist, or the overthinker, or the emotional carrier? So I'd love to share your experiences below in the comments, and let's chat about it more. And if you'd like to explore more about your father's story, I do invite you to work with me. I have a Wound to Wisdom, Healing the Father Wound through Saturn reading that I'd love to dive deeper into with you, especially if you have Saturn retrograde. And together explore what that path to greater self-love and authentic power and personal freedom might look like for you. Because the goal isn't to carry the wound forever. The goal is to discover the wisdom hidden inside it. So, hope this helps, friends. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Keep nurturing your astrology.